I Can Feel You Forgetting Me by Neon Trees. 10 songs long, 33 minutes, about 34 minutes long. And I was about to go in on the title.
So Neon Trees were like an indie alternative band. Like they were really prevalent in the early 2010s. Like you definitely heard a few of their songs.
A staple of 2010s indie alternative.
Yeah, like you got Everybody Talks,
Animal.
Animal. You have 1983. You got songs that are like they're that bridge between pop and alternative rock, pop and indie, and it's some of those songs actually were quite good because it was genre defining and a big sound of that era, and I liked it at the time. And they released another album like 2014, and it was like hit and miss with it, but then they like went basically stone quiet, and then they came back together last year and said, "Oh, we should, let's collaborate on an album." And they made this, and
it's fine. And here's
I don't think it's good.
I'm glad you pinpointed them in this like early 2010s period of alternative pop, because they're very much Neon Trees. You can consider very much a contemporary to Arctic Monkeys in that time period, especially around AM. Like,
you have like
Neon Trees obviously started later, but
yeah, you have like a sound of the early 2010s. You're gonna add, like, if you have like a playlist of the sound of the 2010s, you're gonna add like Are You Mine? You're gonna add like Everybody Talks. You're gonna add some like Mountain Sound from Of Monsters and Men. You're gonna add a bunch of different artists that really were prevalent in the time, but some of them have moved on into other songs. Obviously, Arctic Monkeys released one of the best albums of the 2010s. In Chocolate Bass, you have different ones that are expanding genres and doing stuff. You have other ones that revert completely backwards. Like, who's the one that oh my god, I can't think. Lonely Hearts.
No, I totally know what you're talking about. Pumped Up Kicks.
Yeah,
Foster the People.
Foster the People. Because you got Foster the People's also that sound, because their album came out in 2011 with Pumped Up Kicks, Hell on a Beat and stuff. So that's that sound of the 2010s.
A lot of the story of Audioface is us loving this music from like the late...
Yeah, exactly.
This alternative pop music from the late aughts, early 10s.
M83 goes into there, and that bridges an even more gap.
Only to have our hearts broken in like the mid-10s.
Exactly, and a lot of them, some of them stopped making music, and then you have this.
This is one of those bands that dropped off. It seemed like it was
definitely dropped off.
It seemed like it was promising in the beginning of it. Honestly, like the song sounded okay, nothing groundbreaking, but okay. But the key part is nothing groundbreaking, like literally nothing.
And they made one of my least favorite songs of the entire year. So it's sort of Nights used to are like, oh, they're okay. Like I could hear some of their sound. They're trying to like do something different here. That I'm like, okay, it's not great, not terrible. You have Skeleton Boy, which is like, okay, this is more of like their older sound, but trying to add some like electronic. I'm like, don't Foster the People me. And they go to Living Single and they Foster the People me, and it's just the vocals, the production of that song are just ass. It's a really bad song. The lyric, it's like Living Single feels worse than the body than drugs do. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, what the. That's a terrible lyric. And it's the production. It's very cliche. It just sounds like a band like again in like 2017 tried to do stuff, and it's now coming out in 2020. I'm like, you've already missed the mark of that ship, and you've missed the mark of a ship that already sailed like 10 years ago. So it's just a really awkward point, and they tried way too many sounds in it.
It's like making 2010s nostalgia music way too early.
Yeah, it's just
like it's too soon. It's too soon to consider it being groundbreaking. It's like ship sailed, but it's too early for us to consider this like a throwback to this era.
Because you have like a lot of indie artists that throw back to the 90s, right? Like B2BB and a bunch of others who throw back to the 90s.
That's basically what indie is.
That's what indie is right now, and I've already yelled at my gripes at it because I hate grunge because I really don't think it's good. But some of the indie work is good because it expands on it. This is just like stagnant, plus you add a lot of electronic stuff that I really don't think a lot of these indie alternative bands know how to use it in the right ways, because it sounds way too manufactured, or it sounds it literally can hurt the ears at some points of it. So it's ironic because then This was it felt like the longest 30-minute album I've ever heard in my life because it just took a while for me to get
quotable.
in.
It's the longest 30
It just, it kept, I really wanted to like this. They finally give me something with New Best Friend, which is the last goddamn song on the album, and that one is a decent song. I can get on board with them. Like, if you made more tracks in an album that were similar to that, you would have had a decent album. But I will applaud them on trying something different because, I will never rail against you for trying something different. I will rail against you in the way you make it because it's either good or bad. There's no in between, and this is obviously on the bad spectrum, but, always commend people for trying it. But you missed the mark, which is sad because there's you can hear in different songs that there are little hints of like the brilliance and stuff that they've had before, but it never comes to fruition. New Best Friend is good because it's about living like kind of being isolated, kind of being by yourself in that regard, and being like New Best Friend is like your mind, your own different thing.
You are your new best friend.
Exactly, and it's saying like living with your own thoughts and stuff, which I really like the theme of that song. I think they could have expanded upon that more and be better.
Interesting juxtaposition between that and being alone is worse than drugs.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing where it's just they are hypocritical within themselves within the own album. So it's just it really missed a lot of marks for me, which is sad. So
yeah, definitely somewhat disappointed, but I didn't have super high hopes, expectations of this album.
Well, it's not high hopes, which is.
I'm giving this the starter, which was anarcho-patriotism.
I was gonna go anarcho-capitalism, but one of the two.
It's like a contradiction. It's just a contradiction.
It's a walking contradiction.
Like you just can't have that.
And I'm an anarcho-patriot.
No. Specifically, I guess again, like you can have a state within anarchy. So if you like that anarchist state because it's the only anarchist state and you feel patriotic to that, I guess. But you cannot be an anarchist who is patriotic to the United States.
Because
that guy on Twitter.
That's exactly when you said I'm like that's
because the United States is not an anarchist system, and because of that, you're not going to show loyalty to a state because that is. Loyalty to a state is inherently not anarchist.
It's just the exact polar opposite of anarchy, which doesn't make sense. It's as this I say, I love the free market, but I'm a cultural Marxist, which also makes completely no sense.